call, please.
Yes, thank you for coming to the Wednesday, February 5th, 2014 Ann Arbor DDA board meeting. Cindy Clark, Russ Collins.
Here.
Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Roger Hewitt. Joe Lowenstein.
Here.
Al McWilliams.
Here.
John Moat.
Here.
Rishi Narayan.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Steve Powers.
Here.
Sandy Smith.
Here.
John Splitt.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Standing, we start every meeting with audience participation. We have 4 people, max 4 minutes each. We have one. Martha, can you say your last name, please?
Valadez or Valadez.
Valadez, please. If you'd go to the podium, and you've got 4 minutes.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Marta Valadez. I'm the transit organizer with the Ecology Center, and I'm working with Partners for Transit, who's it's a coalition of, I'm sure you've heard of it, a coalition of grassroots organizations who are advocating for expanded and improved bus services in the county, but specifically we're focused on the urban core of Washtenaw County, so that's Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti Township, Pittsfield Township, and Saline. I want to thank Susan Polly for, sorry if I said your name, for inviting me here today. And I want to just introduce myself, let you know what our efforts are for Partners for Transit, where we're heading this year, and hopefully get some support from your organization and your respective businesses. And get more representation in our efforts with Partners for Transit. I understand that your organization is very progressive or very supportive of transit in our community with the downtown pass and just the support of getting workers to this community and back and forth to their homes is very important for Partners for Transit and for our respective organizations. And so last year our focus was very much on increasing awareness about transit, getting feedback from community groups in the area, and understanding what the needs were, and also participating in community meetings that the ride was hosting to really get an understanding of where services was heading in the coming years. So we were involved in the process for the 5-year plan, gave feedback, and we're grateful to the ride for understanding what the needs are and being receptive to our feedback. So we are seeing some of our comments that were given at the 5-year plan meetings last year go into effect with the 5-year plan. Our concern is that the plan is great, but the 5-year plan is not going to be in existence unless there's funding behind it. So we really want to encourage folks to see that the ballot come to reality and encourage folks to attend on February 20th and be behind Partners for Transit, endorsing our mission and supporting our efforts, and to really get the word out about why transit's important for all of our key communities in the urban core, and seeing this millage come to reality. It's imperative that we get this millage passed in May, and we'll get it on the ballot, and hopefully, and then seeing it passed in May. So I know I don't have very much time, but I will leave some information, a handout, a commitment card if your organization is willing to endorse Partners for Transit. And then if you all want to follow up with me, we can have one-on-ones and I can talk a little more in detail about who's involved. We have over 35 organizations who are endorsing business, labor, social service groups, and so it's really a grassroots effort and a coalition that we're trying to do that's intentional about getting feedback of where transit needs are missing or lacking in our community. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have a part of our operations committee that focuses on transportation. I don't know whether it makes sense for you to go to that meeting, be part of that. Does that make sense for those folks? Okay. If you can follow up with Susan, she can get you that information. Thank you. There are no other folks here that want to speak. The audience is a little thin today. So, reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter, Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council.
Thank you.
Ray is always here.
I'm usually never on time. It's the only meeting I ever make on time. At last night's meeting of the CAC, members asked me to express our group's continued support for public art in downtown Ann Arbor and also throughout the city. Long before there was any city program for supporting public art, the Percent for Art program or any other kind of program, it was one of the CAC's major goals. We played an active part in establishing the Downtown Public Arts Committee and also the very difficult process of setting up a Public Arts Commission that followed. It wasn't easy. And we realize now that some of the major recent decisions of the City Council may stall Art Commission projects in the works and will require a reshaping of the program. But we downtown residents wish to say that we appreciate the Art Commission's efforts over the years. Its members have made valuable contributions to Ann Arbor and the arts community, and we will continue to support all efforts of the city, individuals, and groups and organizations to make sure that commitment to more public art installations remains an important community goal. Last night, the Citizen Advisory Council heard a presentation by Will and Mary Hathaway in support of a resolution which is currently being developed by council members to council to approve the designation of what's called an urban public space on the ground level of the library lot. Over the last few years, a number of people and groups have come to the CAC to argue in favor of turning a major part of the property above the underground parking structure into a public park. In each case, we have refused to give our support. We do strongly support the development of a significantly sized public plaza on Fifth Avenue, on the Fifth Avenue side of the site, as green as it can possibly be, and that might be potted rather than planted, as well as the use of a major part of the library lane for scheduled community activities. Also, pedestrian walkways to Liberty Plaza and the library lot development that is sensitive to the needs of the public library, and possible connections also to the Lake Transit Center, nearby historical properties and districts. But we also believe that any planning for that library site must include the possibility of a new tax-producing private development on the major portion of the property. We also believe that any future private development should be encouraged to work cooperatively to integrate itself with and complement the adjoining public plaza in space. We all know there are some in our community who would like still to turn the entire library lot into a public park. We don't. And we were very pleased last night to learn that Will and Mary Hathaway don't either. At least they no longer do. Their proposed resolution, we believe, is moving in a direction that significantly agrees with that of the CAC, and we hope eventually the DDA. Some of us made suggestions to last night as to how they may make that resolution even better. We hope it will be improved at this particular point, and of course, part of it will have to be public art. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. The next on the agenda is the communications from the DDA members. In this time period, we also will be going through a little bit of our retreat, kind of taking a look at some of the highlights and spending a little more time developing, flushing out some of those. But before we dive in, are there any other communications that anybody would like to share? All right. Seeing none, I want us all to kind of turn our attention back to the posters here. We really started out with our priorities. Where was the first?
So it started with trends. So right behind John, you're going to see trends 1, 2, 3, 4. Kind of what's happening in downtown. Led to DDA role, and then right behind you is the more in the left.
I thought we had one more that started with the very front cover that said what we wanted out of the retreat was the shared priorities, finding gaps, and then there was a third something.
Coming up with at least one good idea.
One good idea. So sorry, I just got a little. out of sync there. But what, I think what we need to do is to give a little bit more flesh on some of these bones here, and then to begin to help staff be able to frame what directions that we're going to be going in. So we've got a 10-year plan that we look at financially. We've got a 5-year plan that is in front of you right here, which is always in draft form, and it's always meant for us to keep looking at it, refining it, moving the mark forward, thinking this is an organic, living, breathing document. So how do we direct the staff to be able to begin doing that and having that in line with our priorities here? Ultimately, we will have another session that we'll schedule, a couple hours to continue to do this, but I'd like to do a little bit now and in some sense a reporting out of what we did, but building on what we did last week.
One of the things that we talked about before the meeting was trying to identify out of these things what items are not on the 5-year plan right now, so that we can put them on there to be part of our discussions, and then potentially using the 5-year plan and 10-year plan as a basis to start the conversation. So, one thing is, A, do people agree that using these 5 and 10-year plans is a good basis for our next conversation? B, what items do we want to pluck off this to ask staff to add to it? And then C, once, maybe down the road a bit, will be, as we start thinking about what projects we can tackle, we'll have to think about our committee structure a little bit and how, what's the most responsive way. So those are some things, a lot of it today, I think, is the idea of laying the framework, for what we want to talk about and what things we'd ask staff for.
Well, answer my thoughts on the importance of the 5-year plan. I think it is important for us, the DDA, to have a plan of projects. Very selfishly, from the city's perspective, I think that then allows for better incorporation and coordination with the city's planned projects. And we have a very robust capital improvements planning process. I'm not suggesting the DDA move in that direction, but I think it is important that we have some articulation of what it is we're thinking about doing over the next whatever number of years, 5 years or some other numbers. I would, to take a piece of what John just outlined for us, I would see a plan as being an important product from our strategic planning work.
Mm-hmm. And some of the things in the plan are very are capital, and some of them are not. One of the, doing the bricks on North Fifth Avenue, obviously an expensive and intense project, capital-intensive project to carry out. What's not on here that I don't believe is, but ambassadors, is that something that we're going to continue to go forward? It's not on here. It will cost money to do, and it'll take staff time to mold what it is we want out of the project of ambassadors and do the whole hiring of, if that's what we end up doing. So, but it's something that won't show up in the CIP, and it won't, but it doesn't belong in here. The other piece is the marketing piece. And, are we hiring somebody? Is that belong in this plan? How do we, when we do have the plan, then how do we get this and say to staff, move these projects forward?
Maybe a question for Susan. How do we see the finances fitting in here? In other words, some of these projects could take a whole lot, others are more affordable, but we haven't been very successful in projecting our revenue.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think it was something that at the tail end of the retreat was brought up, as we need to get real. We're just, as staff, working on the pieces from the city about next year's budget. It is not likely that there's going to be a whole lot of money in the next couple of years for a lot of big projects, but that shouldn't keep us from beginning work on planning them. And one of the elements that I think this group can help us a lot with is to give us some direction as staff, knowing that dollars are not going to be that many discretionary dollars. Would you like us to frame kind of the big ideas and we begin to tackle one or two really big projects? Or conversely, we tackle some smaller projects because our dollars are fewer. We assign ourselves assignments around smaller chunks of money. There won't be likely a lot of clarity till we actually finish the budget process with the city. We're still getting revenue expectations and that kind of thing. But I do think we can begin with an idea. There's not going to be we can't just write a big check for big projects. We're going to have to take these in bite-sized pieces. Multi-year approaches is going to be something we're going to
So the
address.
sequencing would be
All
very
of that, and
important.
that's within our control. We're also going to want to wait for the framework plan to be completed before we actually begin a design for a streetscape project. But none of that is in the way of actually beginning work today. Where are the priority areas that we can do today? Taking bite-sized pieces toward getting there, we can begin that today. But there won't be large chunks of money to accomplish things in big fell swoops.
I think two things that should go in here are indeed the ambassador program. We've talked a lot about that.
It's in here.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it in there? Okay.
Yeah.
And then the marketing.
The marketing's in here too.
Is it? Excellent. They've both been updated. I haven't looked at this newest one. The choice of a draft, right? And then again, as far as the 5 and 10 year plan, absolutely. You know, the planning is, the more you plan, the more successful you're going to be. As far as the 10-year plan goes, I know I brought it up at the retreat 1.0. That should be one of our next steps. I think you may have convinced me that it's an important step, but the first thing that we have to do is really do our visioning, and then as we look at the budget, we realize, this is something, it's still the most important piece to us, but we can't afford to write that one big check, but how can we use that 10-year plan to get to where we want to be on that bigger project?
And to bring us back to the debriefing on the retreat, it was very helpful to me as staff, and I hope it was helpful to you, to start at the trends level, because the DDA going forward has needs to address that weren't here 10 years ago. I mean, a topic area we had at the retreat was retail. 10 years ago, retail was a very different kind of animal than it is today with Amazon.com. It's very different today than the rents post-recession. Where are those going? What is the role for a DDA with retail being such an important part of downtown? What role can we play? And that's where this marketing is a good question to explore. Downtown also was a little bit more freestanding years ago. Regionalism is now something that we all feel, I think as a community, is much more front and center. The dialogue, we're hearing from community members is about how do we work together to connect our communities. What is the role for the DDA with a regionally centered downtown, which is a center of prosperity for a larger area? So to start at that level is really helpful to us. The money, we can figure that out once we know where the programs are going. But finding ourselves to what's most important for our downtown. We want to encourage vitality. We want to encourage quality of life. We want this to be a welcoming community. What role should the DDA play today, 2014, 2015, 2016, to encourage that community, that vision? It's very helpful to start at that point before we get to the actual dollars and cents.
So housing, what can staff work on a draft or a proposal about how we work with our partners on that? I mean, I think there's now that we're a little bit past the recession, there's an idea that we may be able to influence that.
So with that in mind, maybe you and I are telepathically working together. But yesterday I had a chance to meet with Mary Jo Callan, who heads our community development department. That's the county and city department. And she and her staff are working to create an RFP for a needs assessment. Because post-recession, I think we all need to understand a little bit more where are the needs and how we can meet those needs. So it's my expectation to bring this to you in the coming weeks, what this is. Last time there was a needs assessment, the DDA partnered with the county and the city on this, and it would be my hope we could partner with them again. So the end result of that would help to guide whatever policy choices we make. because dollars are limited, it'd be helpful to have some guidance from objective data. So that will be coming to you.
Well, one thing as I look around at the trends here, it seems as though it would be very helpful to pluck off this, any items that our consultants within the street framework plan might want to hear about what we see as the trends moving forward. And even nitty-gritty things like, we talked about more food trucks delivering downtown, and what's that impact on streets? And, some of the nitty-gritty stuff here is pretty useful. It would be nice to, really use this information. The other thing I'd kind of throw out to folks to ponder is, as you look through these things, are there particular ones that we should be using as our filter as we look at the 5-year plan and projects? What matters? There's a lot of conversation generally about millennials, for instance, and what millennials may be looking for in a community. Are there certain things that resonate more than others? So I'd just be interested, including those folks who didn't get the chance to be at the retreat, to, take a look, throw out what things we should be using as a filter for pondering.
And I want to point out that I channeled Russ, who was not there, by making sure that the final line of this was that we need to make sure that we transform what we did during that session into something that's more. So that's part of what we're doing here, and then continuing to try to build on that with yet another session, because it can just be a waste of time if we don't actually take what we've done here, which is also on your yellow sheets of paper, and be able to leverage that into some sort of action. So thank you. Thank you for being there.
One thing that we didn't mention I don't think, at the retreat was the role of events. And traditionally, as the DDA, we haven't done events because the area associations do events. But we have been kind of batting it around a little bit lately, especially after we came back from IDA and saw that those business improvement districts, that's a lot of what they do. And I had mentioned, I think, to Susan, just going through something that came out of IDA, which was a list of all the different things that these business improvement districts do around the country. One of the things was a Geeks Night Out that they do in a couple of different places where they want to encourage these tech sectors. And since that's kind of been an area where we do want to encourage development, and there's the whole development that's occurring on Liberty Street. So something like that, do we want to look at events in terms of money? I think those are pretty inexpensive to relatively, when compared with rebricking an entire street or something.
Yeah, that can be added.
Well, that's not that far from my thought of trying to get a regular group of residents meeting that are actively living downtown, maybe new to downtown, finding out what a little bit their needs are. So brainstorming the fact that wouldn't it be great to have a residential Go Pass program, but it may be irrelevant without going to these folks and asking them. I mean, they may all have one in some way from in their pocket from their affiliation with the university or their work or something like that. So outside of, making a guess like that outside of having real data on it, it seems rather foolish. So getting
like
a group together
focus
like that. So maybe that's in events. Maybe it's smaller kind of seed events where we can touch base with people that are in these sectors, and we can draw information from them.
Or a big-ass film festival.
We can do that too.
I saw our logo up there.
So before everybody goes today, we're going to try to make sure that we find on your calendar some possible dates for the follow-up meeting, the follow-up retreat. And with that in mind, we'll also be in touch to make sure if you have additional things you'd like to add, we'll be sure to do that.
We have the partnerships on Wednesday, the 12th, and operations on Wednesday, the 26th. I'm just going to toss out the Wednesday in between, since we seem to do things on Wednesdays around here.
We'll send that date out and find out when on that date. We might find as many of us as possible.
So Wednesday, then
19th?
19th?
Forget it.
It doesn't matter.
The day before Sandy Smith's birthday.
That's true.
Oh.
That's true. That means you have to let me win more chocolate.
Ulterior motives.
I
Right.
didn't say it was on your birthday.
It's my birthday week.
So do people feel comfortable that there's not any other information we need to ask Susan to try to pull together for this next meeting and conversation? Just
So we
wanna
know
make
the
sure.
10-year plan update, we know the 5-year plan, we're going to add a couple of things to that, but that'll be updated. You've seen, I think this goes back to November, so we need to make some updates anyway. What other things would people like to see?
Well, personally, I think we're at a point where some of that financial grounding is going to be very important. We can continue to do visioning and trending and all that, but we need to bring in the financials here pretty soon.
I wonder if there is a way.
What's the time, let me just quick, what's the timing for when we'll have more clarity on that?
So Joe is working on it even as we speak, and we're now getting revenue data, and so that's sort of the key piece that we've been waiting on. We have, I think, enough to give to you that's sort of the beginning of what would be the beginning of a budget dialogue at Ops anyway. You're within shooting distance of what I think we need. So I think by the 19th, I think we'll be ready.
I wonder, just for the purposes of our next meeting about the long-term plans, if we could even something as simple as have each of these items on like note cards or cards or something that are separated into like inexpensive, medium, and huge, so that we could kind of sort them around and order them and prioritize that way, just to make it a little more easy.
We can do that.
Because in the deck like this, it's harder. I actually noticed there's some things in here twice because it's harder to look at like that. So, it would just be easier to prioritize if we can see small, medium, and large, and we can just move it around.
And maybe the other, maybe the other piece could be what are sort of tangible, visible projects versus planning projects. Because, for instance, you could start planning a large project, and just use the seed money for planning purposes versus going out and actually doing a real project. It'd be nice to have that differentiation too.
We can do that. With, just to finish this as well, there's also the steps you can take. So, for instance, at the last board meeting, we approved hiring Carl Walker and Carl Lukenbach to do a schematic to add elevators at 4th and William. On this list, there's also a series of other things at 4th and William. We can break this into bite-sized pieces. So before you do the elevators, the next step might be to do the engineering of it. So what we'll do is try to create in a way that you could assemble them and say, here's a project we'd like to pursue, here are the pieces we would pursue, just to make it as useful as possible. And then in terms of planning and projects, maybe I'll add a third one, which is grants, which is different than our actually overseeing it, if that's comfortable for you.
Good point, yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's a really good idea, but I do want to make sure that we don't lose a big project because it looks like it is too difficult, that it doesn't fit within the budgets that we have without that piece, without saying, well, but we can rip this card into 5 different pieces and stretch it out. So being able to have the flexibility of doing things in bite-sized pieces, I think is really important.
Up at paper clips, so you can paper clip, so you know where you're going, but then you could break it into this year, next year, the year after. Yeah.
I just thought of another thing too is I don't know whether we will be having a conversation about the street projects in particular, but if there's any information the city has on what they've got coming up in this next few years on any of these that might influence our thinking.
I think that I have in here the dates. We went through the CIP process with staff, so I had at that moment the current thinking on when projects might move forward.
Great, thank you.
State Street's down the road and Liberty Street, and so I have a sense of resurfacing and other projects.
Great, thank you.
Okay, good, very helpful.
So, a request then before we meet again, if everybody would just review this, because I had not looked at it since November, October, whatever. Just the yellow pages are just kind of a synopsis of what's up on the walls, kind of just where we were. So just kind of take a look at it and refresh yourself before we dig back in again and spend another couple hours and try to come up with a 5-year plan and some direction for staff. You good?
So are you going to try to set a date?
The 19th, we're going to aim.
We'll
Start
ask.
there on the 19th.
All right. Approval of minutes, which do include an outline of the retreat at least, pages 2 through 10.
Motion to approve?
Second? Any changes, comments, deletions? Seeing none? Motion to approve? All in favor? Aye. All right. Nobody said no? Go. Subcommittee reports, partnerships, economic development, communications committee, starting with marketing downtown. And Rishi, you've been
Duly
for that.
nominated.
Yes.
Motion. So at our last partnership PEDCC meeting, which I'm petitioning to rename it. At the last meeting, we invited all 4 of the downtown area associations, their directors or the person in charge, to come and talk to us a little bit about what it is that they do, knowing that each association has different resources, different staff, different budgets, and as we're trying to figure out what our place is in this world of marketing downtown, and not just jumping in and doing our own thing and then duplicating what someone else is doing. So we thought we wanted to reach out as a first step and see what the area associations are doing, and I think it was pretty enlightening for all of us that were there. In just reaching out and saying, what do you do and what do you need help with? And one of the big things that has been echoed around is events. They really want, some of them are already putting on events, and those that aren't putting on a lot of events want more events in their downtown area, because that's what brings people and creates a culture and hopefully makes things happen. So there was a lot of talk about that, and I think we're kind of a little bit on the same page. And the question is how do we do that? Maybe it's not prudent to say we're going to start putting on our own events, but it may be in the form of grants or approval system or something like that we could help facilitate more events, more diverse events, continuous events, annual events, things like that, to try to help bring them on downtown. So that was a big thing that they talked about. Another big thing was that they really feel like they can market to their local, the Ann Arbor community. They feel like they have that down. That's not something that they felt was out of their wheelhouse, and they felt like marketing to the to the nation and the farther reaches of the state was something that the Pure Michigan campaign was doing pretty well. They felt like that was fine. It was this nebulous area of like outside local. I don't really have a good term for it, but the Plymouth, the Novi's, trying to get people that live close enough where they can come week after week, so they can have repeating customers. That one of the conversation topics we had consistently was, it's great to get tourists, but for those businesses that need, people coming week after week and month after month to really sustain their business, how do we find those people? And those people are located just outside of Ann Arbor, and how do we make it attractive for them to come back, on a regular basis? So that was one of the other kind of bigger points that were brought up. So it's kind of funny because that the conversation really went from like, what do you do, to this is what we want, and it went strong in this events and marketing kind of way. So at this point now, I think we're at this kind of next step where, we've had some talks about, the other kind of big partner in the room is the CDB, and maybe reaching out to seeing if they want to come out to our next partnership meeting and talk to us a little bit about the nitty gritty of what they do. Obviously, we know a little bit about like what's in the paper and from what we know from our own personal experience, but that might be a good next step to kind of find out what they do, and then I think then we have all pieces of who's kind of doing things downtown, maybe not all, but some of the bigger ones that we know of, and we can start to see how we fit into this kind of puzzle, what makes the most sense for the resources we have. We're going to be talking about this in terms of our bigger picture and what we're talking about with the retreat, and the dollars that actually go to it, and the resources for staff. So I think that was a good stepping stone to the kind of plan that we're creating. Russ.
So as you think about those things, I encourage you to remember the organizations like the ARC and the University Musical Society and the plethora of student groups that produce events and the Michigan Theater, and there's a tremendous number of events that are already in Carytown Concert House that happen that I sometimes think are thought of as background. They're already in the business of producing events, and sometimes a little bit of application of resources creates a tremendous acceleration in their ability to accomplish things.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was one of the things, like, I don't think we're going to go into the business of producing events. I think that would be a bad idea.
It's fine to go into the business of producing events. It's really just a matter of, determining what the most efficient use of funds are and where those things are.
And as you pointed out, there's plenty of amazing organizations that are putting on great events. The question is how do we tie them into the downtown and kind of unify them? And that's, I think, one of the questions that we have.
I think an interesting thing, before you said that, I was thinking, well, we've got so many events and things happening in Ann Arbor that draw people from that suburban area, southeastern Michigan, that are coming to go to all these sorts of events. If there's a way to leverage off that to have them more aware of the other opportunities out there in town to do things.
Yeah, and I don't know if I don't know if there is maybe maybe it comes into like connecting these people that are putting on events with these area associations that are now publicizing these things. Like, I know that happens, but for whatever reason, these area associations feel like, oh, we need more events. And so I'm sure there are people that are putting on events that are like, there are tons of events. So where this break in communication exists, that's what we need to try to find, I think, maybe, and try to patch up a little bit. So our next partnership, at our next partnership meeting, we haven't really extended the invitation yet, but hey Susan, can we talk to the CVP and see if they want to come out, and then I think maybe even another step would be we could even talk to some of the bigger producers of events and see what kind of feedback they have.
So yesterday I met with the CVB director, and
Always on top.
I did, and so I have in my hands her marketing plan. So maybe after the meeting, I'll share that with you and Al. So not next Wednesday, but the meeting after, so you have an idea of what it is she'll come to speak about, including resources and the staff and all the other good stuff. So she's ready for us.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Russ, could you talk just a little bit about being somebody who puts on an event, so like the film festival? You talked about that. What State Street's role has been in the past, and maybe where we can put salt on it to to spice it up more if there was a role for us in there.
Well, State Street, several years ago, realized that it was UMS and the Symphony and the Michigan Theater and other organizations that were driving a lot of traffic downtown, and they actually provided pretty aggressive institutional support dollars to those organizations, realizing that it was probably a better investment to invest in the stability of those organizations than to invest in creating a new kind of an event. Now, there's new leadership at the State Street Association, and I don't know, they may reassess that or determine that there's something else that they want to do. And the State Street merchants look down at Main Street and see the old car festivals and the food festivals and things like that go on. And those things are great, adding those things are great. But if you think about the folk festival, and you said, if the folk festival had $20,000 more, would that produce a kind of benefit? If the ARC had $20,000 more subsidy to bring in X kind of event, 4 more large-scale concerts that they do at Hill or Michigan Theater or something like that, would that turn the kind of numbers that people are looking at? So sometimes I think people look at, going from 0 to something big, which usually takes some time to do that, without looking at, in a sense, pouring gasoline on a fire that's already burning, but it might be able to increase that activity just that skosh more, that delivers an extra 20, 30,000 people, which is more than, another new event that starts from scratch has to do.
And then I think that's exactly what, when Rishi and I were talking about this stuff, that's really the direction I think we're leaning in, is finding out what those things, what are those packages or opportunities that we could offer that would then be applied for. So we're not stepping in and doing anything, we're just providing support for stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
And again, it's a sketch right now, and we still need to know what those specific packages would look like. But whether it is marketing to the Novi area for the film festival or whatever that looks like, we don't know yet. But it's very much in line, at least from what we're hearing from these organizations, that we want to facilitate what's already there and not do our own thing.
Yeah, well, and doing a new thing is good as long as it's viewed in the context of best use of resources. And I think that's the only thing to do, is that there's no lack of events. Sometimes the right kind of application of resources can kick that up, or make it relatively easy for someone that already does 10 events to do 12 events. It just brings that risk threshold down so that they can go ahead and do that. And so anyway, but then, of course, we get into the never-ending swirl of subsidizing arts organizations, which the DDA has been reluctant to do, except for kind of capital projects or other kind of one-off or special projects, which, again, is not illogical, but the governmental reluctance in our community to get involved with arts activities, in my view, don't reflect community values, but clearly there are people who feel like there's no appropriate role for government funding of the arts in our community. I do believe that's a minority, a vocal minority role, but I do believe that it's one of those strategic dynamics that need to be addressed, but it's a very difficult one to address, and they don't tend to be effectively addressed in the kind of planning that we're looking at here.
The impression I got from what you were describing was not so much the idea of trying to get yet more people into town necessarily, is to connect those people that are already coming into town with the opportunities that, I was talking with the street associations about their own events that tie into a film festival or something. It sounded like kind of we were looking for the gaps.
Yeah,
of how to connect.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got a store and you sell widgets, and there's going to be this event, and if you extend your hour, looking for those.
It's the
gaps
gaps
and
between your
opportunities.
football games, your art fairs, your summer festivals, the major events that people know, graduation, and how do we thrive, in other times as well. And there are lots of things that are going on. Graduation's big on something, so.
I would say all, yes to all of the above at this point. At this point, we're trying to, yes, more people and those people doing more things and all of that. I mean, we're supposed to be fostering private investment in downtown, and, making the businesses that are here successful is a great way to do that. So, or helping them be successful, I shouldn't say making them be successful. But, and I think as far as supporting, the fine line of supporting the arts, this is a fairly direct way to say we're not really. Here's economic development. Here's what we're doing to cause people to come downtown and spend money, which is economic development in our downtown. So that whether that's an art event or a dog show or whatever it is, it's just numbers at that point. It's just if we spend X, Y number of people come downtown and they spend Z.
We're having a discussion that is probably appropriate at the committee, maybe not appropriate at the board. And I haven't talked to the ARC or anything, but for example, I bet you if you said, hey ARC, here's $20,000 if you'll do 5 large-scale concerts in downtown Ann Arbor, I bet you that would generate 8,000 to 10,000 people. And again, you'd have to ask the ARC if that would be the right kind of motivation, but that's the kind of thing that you apply those funds, and then there's a direct there's probably a direct amount of $2 a person and $3 a person, and you've got that traffic that's driven in a very clear way. Bob may be able to either say this
sounds good. Can we roll on it?
So we are definitely still in the exploratory phase of programming and determining what it is that makes the most sense. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Oh, thank you. So we managed to get a little more piece of the retreat work.
Yeah. Well done, Sandy.
We also had, as part of partnerships, Jennifer Hall from the Ann Arbor Housing Commission come, and just as there is an insatiable need for events, there is an insatiable need for housing funds. And so Jennifer outlined to us that in addition to the $300,000 that the DDA provided in this fiscal year, earlier in the fiscal year, there's she has an additional request for $600,000 to be used for capital improvements at Baker Commons and Miller Manor. So she's going to return in our February partnerships meeting, which is next week, to provide more information about this. And she's going to need a decision by April so that she can submit her application for tax credits. And I think we have talked about at this board before, and also talked about in the committee, that these funds that we have for housing, that the best use is to leverage money so that if we contribute funds that it is matched by the city. And I think we'll continue to have that discussion with Jennifer at the partnerships meeting. So I think that was it for partnerships, and our next meeting is next week, next Wednesday at 9.
Okay, thank you. Operations. We've got to get downtown and the ride presentations. Who's reporting on that?
I'm doing that. So, yes, at our last meeting, we actually had a couple of presentations. One of them was Bill DeGroot from the ride, presented the recently approved 5-year plan, which is some of what Martha was talking about earlier. It's an ambitious plan that is the result of a lot of community input that they've done. It would expand service in terms of hours, especially on weekends. It would expand service during peak hours so that there would be more service. And it would expand reach because of the way they were redesigning both the west side and the Ypsilanti feeder routes, as it were, on the west side feeding into downtown, and the Ypsilanti area feeding into the transit center in Ypsilanti. I know I hear from a lot of my employees that, especially with the expanded service, they have an easy time getting from city center to city center. It's that it can be difficult to get to city center. So this is obviously a careful look at some of those things. It, of course, as Martha also noted, is dependent upon a millage. It has to be funded somehow. The date for that has not been set. I believe at the AAATA's next board meeting, they will be approving the request for putting the millage to the vote, and quite likely will be in the May election. But until that's passed, that's not official. So it was great presentation. Those of us who live and work downtown know the importance of this. We've talked a lot. In fact, in our retreat, we talked some about how some of our problems are the results of our success, and it's very expensive to live in downtown Ann Arbor, or in Ann Arbor in general, and so the infrastructure, along with looking at things like affordable housing, also has to be, how do we get transportation from affordable housing that does exist to downtown. And so this, I think, is very important to downtown and our mission. Let's see.
He's gonna.
Yes. Yeah.
I've been part of a financial subgroup that AATA asked to take a look at financial aspects of the 5-year plan, and I just came together this morning and I signed a report that's going to the AATA board on May 20th, and that report says that the assumptions that AATA is making, AAATA is making, are reasonable, both in terms of the expanded service, the cost of it, and where funds will be coming from, and that it is reasonable to look at 0.7 of a mil as being able to finance that in addition to existing dollars. So that'll go to the board on the 20th, and I think they'll find that helpful in terms of the reasonableness of their assumptions, both the service and the finances.
Very good. I'd like to see that as well. I think, then the other thing we had was Nancy Shore presented to us her report, part of the our funding of the Go Pass and Get Downtown, is that we asked for this annual report, and it showed some interesting things. It continues to be a very valuable tool. We see that its use is expanding. There was a little bit of a dip, it would have been last year, when the cost to employers went up to $10 per Go Pass, doubled from $5. So for those of us who use it, it's looked at as an incredibly useful tool. So there was a little bit of a dip, but it's bouncing right back up as people realize that they need it. Other interesting things that were found were that it's a little bit different mix over time. It had been the last few years, it had been largely service and restaurant businesses that far and away was the largest user, and over the last year it's leveled off more. I believe they're still the highest user, but it's only by a few percentage points now that a lot of the tech companies are using it in the same at the same rates and levels. And that's really interesting because that's, of course, part of the whole object is for it to be a community-wide program, not just one service industry. So it's that's good to see that happening. And I guess we will be looking at our ops meeting, which is when is that? The next ops meeting will be February 26th. We'll be looking at next year's costs, and I assume that also means looking at the funding ramifications for as we look ahead at next year's budget.
So the GoPass reporting was not included in the paper version that was in front of you, but it was in the packet that went out on Friday.
Right.
So it's not right here. But I was particularly struck at the people who chose to drive alone or would be choosing to drive alone in downtown, if not for the GoPass, and that's more than the number represents more than 1,000 cars. And you think about the number of cars in the parking structure that we just built at great expense and nearly $50 million, although that's obviously we know that there's a little more to it, but at a great expense for both the community and for the dollars, and that doesn't even begin to touch what we do with the GoPass here, getting those 1,000 cars off the road.
Exactly. It makes economic sense, it makes ecological sense, and it also makes development sense. This is something else we've heard from Spark and other people moving downtown that it used to be you had to have on-site parking or you weren't going to move downtown, and this program has been touted by a lot of employers as something that makes it possible for them to move downtown without having to have that expensive or just plain not available on-site parking.
Yeah, I think they actually have those in the survey here.
Yeah.
Percentage of decision makers rated get downtown as a significant or crucial factor in their decision to relocate or stay downtown, 20%.
Right. And that's interestingly up from 14% just 2 years earlier. So I guess only other transportation news, we haven't heard a lot about the bike share program, but I did quickly look up on the email, and I guess it's still planning a June rollout. They have either all the contracts in hand or nearly in hand by the February meeting. They're expecting to have all of the contracts in hand, so that's going forward. And I guess that's it on transportation right now.
Financial statements?
That's going to be me.
Okay.
I got the call this morning.
All right.
Roger told me that he was not going to be able to make it today, and I said, this is the meeting that we do the quarterly financials, is it not? He said, yes. So, and I did not have a chance to review anything between then and now, but, so I won't go into the level of detail. I probably won't go into the level of detail that Mr. Hewitt would anyhow. But on the financial statements are on page 11 to 20. The first page is the one that I'll focus on. The TIF fund is basically right on track in terms of revenue. The parking fund, we are over on our expenses. That is, and again, the two things that I want to highlight are where the notes are on the right. That simply has to do with the timing of the First in Washington parking garage. We ended up paying some things this year that were taken out of last year. And in parking maintenance, we have we're under on our expenses, and I don't exactly know what those two notes are. If anybody wants further explanation, I'm sure Mr. Morehouse would be happy to answer your questions. And again, I'm not going to go through page by page. I assume that you all got these in advance, and if anyone has any questions on any particular fund, please. John?
I guess to me it might be helpful actually to ask Joe about these, the parking maintenance fund.
So basically, on the parking maintenance fund, we budgeted so much for the work that we were going to do. Our bids came in under by $330,000. That's what it means. And then our elevator work came in under by $100,000.
Very good.
I probably could have done that.
Oh, Joe doesn't get to get out very much.
Joe has to get on camera. Okay, the parking operations. Starting on page 21, we have our second quarter of 2012 comparison. Hourly patrons are down slightly, revenues are up slightly. And on the next page, we have the first 6 months, the first half of the fiscal year. And patrons are up slightly 1.38%, and revenues are up 4.28%. And on the following page, we have, and I understand this is a report that we're going to get quarterly now, is total permits and system by garage. People have asked that we put that information out there, and so we will be putting that information out there.
So back on page 21, we're looking at the second quarter 12 versus second quarter 13. And you said the patrons were down slightly. But if I look at the weather variance, I see an additional 1.24 feet of precipitation.
Yeah, I think that all of us who are in business know that there's been less activity on the street. Yesterday at Mayor's Marketing Task Force, the mayor mentioned that crime was down significantly for probably the same reason. So, yes, it has been it was an inactive quarter, and this one's not off to a promising start.
Yeah, so likely we'll see slightly declined numbers for the
yes,
we are in.
and again, you know, it affects our parking numbers, it affects everything.
Yes, it does.
So are there any other questions about those numbers?
I just have just a curiosity question, if we know why. So, First in Washington has filled up pretty quickly. Do we know if those are people that are moving over from other garages permit-wise, or if it's new permits? They're moving from other ones.
Anyone who was in there before we demolished it,
Gotcha.
before the parking lot was offered it back, most of them are
Yeah. Cool.
Any other questions? Okay, Art Lowe gave us a parking operations report, as he always does at the meeting. He went over the Winter Classic and all of the opportunities and challenges that pose. Again, at Mayor's Marketing yesterday, Mary Kerr from the Convention Visitors Bureau mentioned that the NHL was very complimentary of the job that Republic Parking did during the event. And again, it's very difficult when everybody wants to come in and then come in gradually and leave at the same time. I think that the public transportation system had difficulty for the same reasons.
Private.
Excuse me. There was no public transportation system operating, correct? But the mass transit system, the taxi system was overwhelmed, I think, shortly after midnight as well. But again, everybody managed to be resourceful and get back where they were going.
That happened after the Super Bowl, too.
Yeah, again, when you have a lot of people wanting to leave all at once, it's difficult.
I just think it's a good opportunity for us all, though, to thank Republic, but also thank the city and all the folks who participated in this. I think it was a great event. And I just would, like to think all of us would really encourage that if there are future opportunities like this, that it worked pretty well. A lot of people came together and made this thing happen and work. And from my perspective, it was just a glowing success. Both the party the night before, the New Year's Eve party, and the event itself, New Year's Day. Let's encourage it more in the future.
It was quite an event to witness. Loading zone taxi cab stands. City and DDA staff have been reviewing loading zones and have developed some recommendations about using those loading zones in the evening from the commercial loading zones primarily, and having them convert to taxi cab stands at strategic places from 6 p.m. until 3 a.m. And right now, those plans, those ideas are out to the neighborhood associations, the area associations, to be reviewed. They will come back with recommendations based upon their neighborhood needs. And then the DDA staff is going to meet with the City Taxi Cab Board and get input as well. And eventually there will be, I think, some plan or something put in place to have taxi cab stands in the evening at the commercial loading zone sites. So that continues to be worked on. Meter removal policy. City Council approved a policy to assign a cost when permanently removing a parking meter unless a public benefit has been determined. And of course, then the next obvious question is, what is a public benefit? And that is being worked on now to define what the community may see as a public benefit. And again, that effort goes forward from there. Downtown ambassadors. Our exploration of downtown ambassadors continues. We're working on an RFQ. We continue to work on an RFQ. We'll continue to get input from people, and I would hope that we may see an RFQ going forward sometime soon. Any questions about any of these things?
And that RFQ is just largely to determine the types of services that could be provided and what those costs would be?
Again, yeah, we have to decide what services. I think that's part of the discussion in terms of an RFQ. What's out there? What do companies do? What, in fact, are we looking for? And I think that it's very important that we determine exactly what we're looking for. But that also involves finding out what these individual companies are capable of doing.
So we're still in the exploratory phase, it's fair to say.
We are, and again, and I think we will be until the RFQ goes out, and again, I hope that that's sometime in the near future. Our next committee meeting is February 26th at 11 a.m.
Thank you. Other DDA business, I did want to highlight something we did at the end of January with the help of Republic Parking. We cleared away a lot of excess snow that had been accumulating downtown, so we went almost curb to curb in some places, which is nothing that's ever guaranteed by the city, and quite frankly, people were just running out of places to put snow, and it was piling up in and around the meters, and I think that it was getting to be very challenging for anybody to even figure out which meter they were at, to be close to a meter, let alone find a number and then go and actually pay for time at a meter. So, Susan, you want to just give us a quick synopsis of your impression of how well that went?
Oh, absolutely. Also, sort of along the lines of earlier comments, I'd like to give a huge thank you to the city crews and the Republic crews who have been working, I think, 24 hours a day. We've had one snowfall after another. And we had reached a point downtown, as you mentioned, but it's probably around the whole city. There's just been so many snowfalls. There's only so many places you can put the snow. So in coordination with City Public Services, we coordinated a snow removal from the downtown so that they could focus on some of the areas just outside the downtown. Everything we're doing, we're making sure they are supportive of, just to make sure we're not duplicating and making sure that, it's sort of seamless. And in the evenings, even after they've been working all day, Republic crews are overseeing their snow removal company, coming in with bobcats, coming in with trucks and hauling it out. We're reaching a point in this winter where Republic and the city crews, I'm sure, are beyond exhausted. While all of us are sleeping tight in our beds, they're out there working. We are, all of us, looking to the future where we may start running out of places to put this snow. And we've been using Vets Park, and I think anybody that looks out there will see we've had a lot of snow lately. And I was talking with Joe a little earlier. I think the city, the county, Republic, a lot of us are going to start running out of product to put down. No one in this wide swath is going to have excess salt anywhere. So it's something to keep an eye on. When Puxatawny Phil came out and saw a shadow, this is one year where I was sad because it would be great to not have as many snowfalls as we're getting, because we're running out of places to put it and running out of salt to treat it. But shout out to our Republic crews. They've just done a remarkable job. Those meters were getting absolutely, you couldn't use them. And I'd heard from at least one person who took a ticket rather than climbing up the snow hill to put money in a meter. And that's just not good customer service. So thank you to those crews, to the city crews, for just a really tough winter. They've stepped it up and done a fabulous job in downtown and all around the city.
You had sent some before and after photos out, and it was dramatic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Amazing, though, that the hardy enforcement people can get there to the meters.
Yeah, but thank you for giving us a chance to thank the city and the Republic crews.
Yeah, it really makes a difference. Any other DDA business that we may have skipped over? Still got plenty of time. Is there other audience participation? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Support? All in favor?
Aye.
Sounds unanimous.